Yogman Primary School in Kano, Northern Nigeria. He buys cartons of sweets from the shop. Then he sells them one by one to his classmates. And he keeps all the profits for himself. That boy was 8 years old. That boy is now worth almost $30 billion. He is the richest person in the whole of Africa. His company produces more cement than anyone else on this continent. He built the largest oil refinery in all of Africa with his own money. He has businesses in over 10 countries, and it all started with a boy selling suits at school. This is the story of Aliko Dangote and how he built an empire. To understand Aliko Dangote, you first need to understand his family, because this is not a story that starts from nothing. Dangote was born in 1957 in Kano, Northern Nigeria. His family was wealthy, serious on money. His great-grandfather, Al-Hassan Dan Tata, was the richest man in the whole of West Africa before he died in 1955. The whole of West Africa, not just Nigeria. His grandfather Sanusi Dan Tata was one of the biggest commodity traders in Kano: rice, oats, groundnuts, very successful man. When Dangote's father died in 1965, he was just 8 years old. His grandfather took him in and raised him. And it was in that house, watching his grandfather work, that Aliko Dangote learned what business really looks like. By primary school, he was already doing this. He would go and buy the full carton of sweets. They sell them individually to his classmates for a profit. Not spend the money, not share the sweets. Keep the profits, reinvest. At 8 years old, the boy understood magic. After secondary school in Kano, he went all the way to Cairo, Egypt to study business at Al-Azhar University, one of the oldest and most respected universities in the world. He graduated at 21 and he came back to Nigeria with a plan. In 1977, Dangote was 27 old and ready to start. He went to his uncle and asked for money. His uncle gave him $3,000. $3,000. That is what the empire started with. He used that money to set up his small trading company in Lagos. He imported rice and sugar from Brazil and Thailand and sold them in Nigeria. The business worked immediately within 3 months, not 3 years, 3 months. He had paid back every dollar he borrowed from his uncle. 3 months. He kept growing. He kept reinvesting. By the early 1980s, Dangote was one of the biggest commodity traders in Nigeria. Rice, flour, salt, pasta, cement imported. If Nigerians needed to eat it or build with it, Dangote was finding a way to supply it. Now set up the cement shift. This is where everything changes. But then, something happened in Nigeria that changed his thinking completely. The government decided to build infrastructure everywhere: roads, school, hospital, government buildings. Nigeria needed cement, a lot of cement, badly, and at that time, almost all of it had to come from outside the country. Dangote looked at that problem and saw an opportunity. Here is something most people do not think about. Cement is in everything. Every road you drive on, every building you enter, every bridge you cross. Cement is not glamorous, but whoever controls cement controls construction, and whoever controls construction controls how a country grows. Dangote understood this better than almost anyone in Nigeria. In the 1990s, he was still importing cement from other countries and selling it here. Good business, but it was not in control. If the ships were late, it was late. If the prices went up abroad, his prices went up. He wanted to be the one who made the cement. In 1999, President Obasanjo came back to power in Nigeria. The government had a problem. Nigeria was spending huge amounts of foreign exchange, importing cement while having all the raw materials to produce it at home. So in 2002, the government launched what they call the Backward Integration Program. Simple idea: if you want to keep importing cement into Nigeria, you must also build a factory here to produce cement locally. Dangote was ready for that moment. He had the money, he had the relationships, he had a plan. He stopped importing and started building. His first cement factory went up, then another, and as other companies struggled to comply with the new rules, Dangote moved faster than all of them. By 2010, Dangote Cement was the biggest cement company in Nigeria. By 2012, it listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange and became the most valuable company on the exchange. What's more than any Nigerian bank, any Nigerian telco, anything. By 2014, it was the 23rd richest person in the entire world. Not in Africa, in the world. And it got there selling cement. Nigeria was just the beginning. Nigeria was not enough for Dangote. He looked at the whole continent and saw the same opportunity everywhere. Africa has over 1 billion people. Most of them live in buildings made of cement, and most African countries were importing that cement from outside Africa. It started moving. Ethiopia, Cameroon, Senegal, Congo, Ghana, Tanzania, South Africa, country by country, factory by factory. In Cameroon, there had not been a single new cement company for 40 years. Dangote walked in and took 43% of the entire market within just 1 year of opening. Today, Dangote Cement operates in 10 African countries with a production capacity of over 50 million tons per year. That is not a company, that is an infrastructure. But cement was only part of the plan. Sugar, salts, flour, fertilizer. Dangote Group became the largest sugar refiner in Africa, the biggest flour miller in Nigeria. It was not just selling products, it was replacing imports, taking things Africa was buying from the outside world and producing them at home. That strategy had one simple idea behind it: stop sending African money to other continents. And then Dangote decided to do something so big that even the people who believed in him were worried. He decided to build an oil refinery, the largest single train oil refinery on the entire planet, in Lagos, on land that was previously an ocean inlet. The project started in 2013. It was supposed to cost $12 billion. It ended up costing $20 billion. It was supposed to take 5 years to build. It took 11 years. There were days when the money was running out, days when people said it would never work. In 2022, when the construction was still not finished, Dangote had to borrow $442 million just to keep going, and still it did not stop. Later, when someone asked him about it, he said, "I didn't know that the mafia in oil is stronger than the mafia in drugs." He said he would not wish the experience on his worst enemy. But in 2024, 11 years after it started, the Dangote Refinery opened. 650,000 barrels of oil processed every single day. Nigeria, a country that had been importing its own petrol for decades despite sitting on some of the largest oil reserves in the world, was finally refining it at home. Dangote's net worth went from $30 billion to almost $28 billion in less than a year. He called it the biggest risk of his life, and it paid off. Now look, this is African Inc. We tell the full story, and the full story of Aliko Dangote is not just one of pure inspiration. There are real questions that follow this empire. Dangote Cement controls an enormous share of the Nigerian market, and despite producing more cement than ever before, the price of cement in Nigeria remains very high. Critics say the company has used its relationship with government to keep competitors out, to make sure the rules favor Dangote and make things harder for everyone else. And those critics are not wrong to ask. When one man's company controls so much of what your country deals with, buys petrol from and eats, that is a lot of power in one set of hands. The refinery also came with its own problems. Local communities near the refinery site were displaced during construction. Many are still waiting for proper compensation. There has been disagreements with the government over fuel pricing and crude oil supply that are still ongoing. Dangote himself has gone from calling the refinery a gift to Nigeria to publicly fighting with the government about it, sometimes in the same week. So what is the full picture? A man who built something genuinely remarkable, who created tens of thousands of jobs, who moved Africa closer to producing its own goods instead of importing everything, and also a man whose empire raises hard questions about competition, monopoly, and what happens when one person gets too big. Both things are true at the same time. So what does the Dangote story actually teach us? First, start with anything you have, even if you take it to borrow money from any relatives or friends. Second, find the thing everyone needs but nobody is making locally. They make it locally. That is the entire Dangote strategy. in one sentence. Third, stay in the game long enough. 11 years to build a refinery, most people would have stopped. It did not. But there is a fourth lesson that is harder to talk about. In Africa, the line between great entrepreneurship and government favorism is not always clear. Dangote succeeded partly because he's brilliant, partly because he works extremely hard, and partly because he understood that in Nigeria and in much of Africa, who you know matters as much as what you build. That is not a criticism, that is a reality. The question for the next generation of African entrepreneurs is whether they can build the same scale of empire without needing that relationship with government to survive. We don't have the answer to that yet, but Aliko Dangote's story is proof that it is possible to build something that changes a continent, even if the full picture is more complicated than the headlines suggest. If this story got you thinking, you know what to do. Subscribe to Africa Inc. We are just getting started. Next episode will be MTN Nigeria, a South African phone company that came into the most difficult telecom market in the world and somehow won. The money they made, the fines they paid, and the government battles that nearly ended everything. That one is even bigger than this. Don't miss it. Stay tuned and watch us. Thank you.